Harry wants what his brother and his father have. The highest levels of the working royals is what Harry wants. But without doing the work, without having the job, and without actually being in the UK, like, permanently, or, like, primarily living in the UK. So that just doesn't make sense logically, so no one is surprised, except for Harry, that he lost the case. Every time he's talking about this issue and saying that he was singled out and he's the only one without the security and the only one without these things, he is talking about 4 people, the most senior working royals: Princess Catherine, Prince William, King Charles, Queen Camilla. Those are the only 4 people who have this highest level of police protection, security, and all the rest that comes with it, because it's kind of a package deal, which we will get into and I will explain as we go. But the point is that Harry keeps saying phrases like, I'm the only one, I'm singled out, everyone else. But he's only talking about these 4. The majority of the royal family, the majority of VIPs coming into the UK do not have police protection 100% of the time. It also says that there's no way to go back to the UK safely, which we know is false.
The decision has been a surprise as well as not a surprise. For the time being, it's impossible for me to take my family back to the UK safely.
And this is more manipulation as well as a flat-out lie. There's, of course, many ways in which he could go back to the UK safely. He just doesn't want to. But also keep in mind, the king helped fund Harry and Meghan during 2020 in part to help with their private security costs, which Harry neglects to mention, conveniently, along with several other dozen lie by omission moments throughout this interview. He sort of spins this question weirdly towards himself, and then he also lies.
Well, for a start, the only time that I've come back to the UK is sadly for funerals or court cases, with the odd charitable function where I can in between that.
So Harry claims here that he only went back for the odd charity event and funerals, but that's a lie. That's false. He also, remember last year, right after King Charles announced that he was undergoing treatment for cancer, that he had been diagnosed, Harry flew back for like a 20-minute meeting with King Charles. I mean, maybe it was more than 20 minutes. It was really short. He flew there, met with King Charles, held up King Charles's schedule because it was not a planned visit, and then flew back right away. So why are you lying, Harry? Because you did come back to see King Charles last year, and you have been back for other things besides funerals, court cases, and the odd charity event. There has been other occasions. He repeatedly says that he's not a private citizen, but that's literally what he asked for. By being a working member of the royal family, you're a public figure. By not having that job, you are a private citizen, albeit from a very famous family and still someone who is known to the public.
You know, I was made a private citizen by the royal household, not by Rabeck, by the royal household. I can't be a private citizen. I will never be seen as a private citizen. I will never be treated as a private citizen. Not by the media, not by most people. But apparently for me, that doesn't matter.
Harry claims that for some reason, his life just doesn't matter enough to get security. But that's not the case. No, it's that his life pre and post-Megxit are 2 very different things. One of them, you're working essentially on behalf of the government as a representative of the monarchy, and therefore some of the crazies out in the world could, in theory, feel that you're somewhat accountable for or represent what the whole of the UK and Commonwealth are doing, and therefore could be, unfortunately, and misplaced, but could be targets of threat. Additionally, as a rather visible representative, you can be seen as a target that could really command attention, as unfortunate as that is. Anyone who pays attention and has a primary education knows that the royal family are not deserving of such things and are not sitting around influencing policy or controlling what the government does. But regardless, it could, in theory, happen. And thirdly, royals do draw crowds for good reasons. People love the royal family and want to see them, so a lot of people congregate, which is a security concern. But now, Harry is completely removed from all of that. Therefore, none of this is a factor for Harry anymore. He was asked, what's the difference between the case-by-case security that you have now versus what it is that you actually want? Again, he sidesteps just being freaking honest, which is firepower, obviously. And instead, he redirects back to his level obsession that he had a very high level of threat and then it was reduced to none or very low. And he's displeased that his security level is decided based on the reason for his visit, which it actually makes perfect sense because they must determine whether crowds and people are going to be a factor. Traveling in and out of certain areas of the city, for example, could be a factor. Attending public versus private events, all of these things impact whether you really need police protection, security, or not really. And this does remind me of the times that he was offered by the king to stay on palace grounds and he rejected this, which really pokes holes in his arguments once again, because palace grounds equals highest security you could possibly have.
I've been treated very, very, very differently to everybody else that exists. All examples that exist, past, present, I have been singled out.
He repeatedly claims that he's been singled out, but he doesn't have the same job title as the everybody that he's referencing. Why must he speak like a spoiled teen? Everybody, always. It's just not that way. These are exaggerations. They do not garner him sympathy. They make him look silly and incapable of grasping the situation in its entirety and realistically.
I don't think that anymore. Now I know that it was, security was used as leverage.
Well, isn't that convenient, Harry? Much like he did a sort of limp, flimsy walkback of the ism claims in his Bradby interview for Spare, where he was like, we never called the royal family ist, did we? Yes, you did, Harry.
If for me, security is conditional on having an official role, one that both myself and my wife wished to carry on, but then was rejected, not by Ravek, was rejected by the royal household. And the result to that is you lose your security. That basically says that you can't live outside of their control if you want to be safe.
So Harry says that he wanted to carry on as a working royal, but it was rejected. Well, that's not true. That is a complete mischaracterization of what happened. Harry and Meghan did not want to keep their positions that they were offered. They were offered to be senior working royals. They were given that job because they said they wanted it. And then when they didn't like it, they thought that they could make up their own new jobs. They carve out a new and progressive role. That's saying I want to make a new job for myself within this company or institution. And that's not how anything works. Anywhere. That's what he and Meghan tried to do to the Queen, and of course were rejected because that's insane. The monarch is the boss in this situation. She, at the time, now he, gets to make the job titles and descriptions and decides who will do what work when, because, they're the boss. It's their face on the money, literally. So super delusional of Harry to misconstrue this in the interview. It's just astonishing.
I think what people will hear is that the only thing that I've been asking for throughout this whole process is safety, both when I was when I was part of the institution and when we left.
Well, that's not what people are hearing, Harry, at all, because he has lots of options to make himself and his family safer if he wanted to. He's even admitted as much in this very interview. He's just choosing not to.
If you're invited to the UK by your family, then we will give you security.
He says that he left the institution, not the family, and he left in 2021, not 2020. Security was pulled in 2020. But no, that is a lie. He did leave the job in 2020, and he had 1 year to be allowed to return if he wanted. But they chose not to. And he may not view it as leaving his family, but he kind of blew that bridge up when he blamed them for everything and undermined his grandmother, the monarch, publicly in the press, and then insulted, lied about, and demonized his entire family on Oprah and in Spare and in other interviews. So he did kind of leave his family. He also claims that his father could just resolve this by stepping aside and letting the experts do an assessment of risk. Again, not grasping that the king's not the one in charge of Ravik, and neither is the royal rep on Ravik. They're just there to give information. He also claimed that he was not allowed a royal role. No. Why lie? He chose not to keep the job. He quit. There is a massive difference.